the next 30 minutes or so, we hope to share with you some information about the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum, the kind of K-12 civic education envisioned by Hillsdale College, and a brief tour of how the curriculum may be used in your instruction. We welcome any questions you may have along the way. Just send us your questions in the Q&A box on your screen, along with your first name and where you're joining us from. We will reserve time to answer your questions towards the latter part of this call. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Katy O'Toole. Dr. O'Toole serves as the Assistant Provost for K-12 Education at Hillsdale College. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Dallas in politics and a Master's and PhD from Claremont Graduate University in political philosophy and American government. Her academic interests include Shakespeare, American political thought, the presidency, and ancient and modern political theory, especially Aristotle and Thomas Hobbes. She has taught government, rhetoric, literature, and moral philosophy at the K-12 level and was the founding headmaster of Founders Classical Academy in Leander, Texas. And Dr. O'Toole is here to introduce you to what the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum is, how it came about, and its underlying principles. Dr. O'Toole.
Thank you so much, Jordan. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm looking at the list of attendees here and seeing a lot of familiar names. If you are working in a Hillsdale affiliated school right now, then I'm delighted to see you and hope that this will be helpful to you and to everyone across the country. What I want to do for those of you who are not familiar with Hillsdale College and our work in K-12 education is give you a brief outline of what we do and why we do it. And then I'll talk to you about the 1776 curriculum and give you a sort of introduction to the curriculum, the principles behind it, and tell you how it all came about. So first, let me tell you about Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is a 175 plus, I think we're 177 years now, year-old institution. We're located in Southern Michigan, and we are a liberal arts college focused on the classical liberal arts and sciences, with a national outreach, partly as a result of the fact that we are not just working to educate the undergraduates who go to college here, 1,500 of them, but we feel a duty and a desire to bring the liberal arts education that these undergraduates receive to Americans across the country. We have online courses covering lots of aspects of the curriculum. Those are available for free at online.hillsdale.edu. We have a weekly or a monthly speech digest called Imprimis, which reaches, I believe, 6 million people now. And we hold conferences and seminars all over the country, aiming to recover excellence in American education at the college level. About 30 years ago, we began working in K-12 education as well. And our mission there was to bring the traditional time-tested study of the liberal arts and sciences that happens here at Hillsdale College into K-12 schools. In 1990, a private school named Hillsdale Academy was founded here on the college campus. Hillsdale Academy is now 30 plus years old, and it's served for many years as a model school for classical schools all over the country. The influence of Hillsdale Academy has spread far and wide, and we're very proud of the work that it's done to promote classical education across the country. About 10 years ago, in the year 2010, 10 plus years ago, we founded the Barney Charter School Initiative. The Barney Charter School Initiative is an outreach effort of Hillsdale College through which we assist local groups of citizens in establishing a classical school for their community. We provide these schools with curriculum, with teaching advice, with regular professional development for their teachers, and with guidance on school leadership and governance as well. The result is we are now working with a network of classical schools across the country who are working from the same curriculum and the same teaching principles that we believe in here at Hillsdale College. It's a strong network, and it's all working in service of our mission, which is to recover excellence in American public education through a recovery of the liberal arts an education for the hearts and the minds of students, and attention to civic virtue, because after all, we are citizens of this country, the United States. That brings us to the 1776 curriculum. As part of our work with all of these schools that we work with, and as part of our work with professors here at the college, we have over the course of the last several decades developed a history curriculum for teaching kindergarten through 12th grade students. And up until recently, this curriculum was available to schools working with Hillsdale College. It's a scope and sequence accompanied by a lot of teaching advice and a lot of recommendations about textbooks and other primary sources that, in the eyes of Hillsdale College's history department and others, we think have got to be part of a K-12 education. When we, after watching the events of the last couple of years regarding K-12 education, the pandemic, all kinds of debates about the content of K-12 education, especially when it comes to American history and civics, and numerous parents becoming increasingly dissatisfied about what was happening in ordinary American schools, we thought we should make these resources available, these resources that have been used in our schools for so long. We should make them available to everyone in the country. And that's what this Hillsdale 1776 curriculum is. We talked to some of the very best history teachers in our network, and we put their advice about how to teach American history together with advice from our history department here at the college. And we produced, to begin with, comprehensive lesson plans, primary source documents, and some sample tests and quizzes to cover the American founding and the Civil War for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. The piece of the curriculum that's been released so far is 2,400 pages long, and it's being used by teachers and parents all over the country. We've had to date 60,000 people download it from every type of K-12 education, public schools and private schools and charter schools and homeschooling as well. And that's exactly what we want. The curriculum is free and always will remain free, because our mission is to see this way of teaching and this knowledge spread into our public schools and private schools and homeschooling families across the country. So the curriculum is, it's a useful resource, we hope. It's been
Jordan, I don't know if you know this, but Dr. O'Toole's stream just went down.
Okay, there we go.
It's just you and me right now.
Yeah, it looks like it.
If you'd like, I'm happy to continue myself with a little bit, or we can wait for Dr. O'Toole to come.
Yeah, no, let's keep going here, and we'll see if Dr. O'Toole can get back online here. So one of the things that Dr. O'Toole had mentioned about here is the role of teachers in creating this curriculum. It's a product of real instruction taught by real teachers to real students at actual schools. So one Hillsdale affiliated school whose teachers were instrumental in developing the curriculum was Golden View Classical Academy in Colorado. And as you've heard him just speak, Dr. Robert Garrow is the headmaster at Golden View Classical Academy. Dr. Garrow earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Colorado Boulder and his PhD from the Claremont Graduate University in Political Philosophy and American Government. He teaches government and moral philosophy at Golden View and is the founding headmaster of the school. And I think this is a good opportunity for him to outline what civic education, the type of civic education that Hillsdale affiliated schools provide to their students. And that's now available through the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum. Dr. Garrow, welcome.
Jordan, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing Dr. O'Toole back on. For everybody, I actually worked for her in Leander and learned every good thing from her. So at Golden View, we teach history and civics very seriously. That means that we think it's important. We think it's an important part of the day. And we begin with kind of a controversial statement or a controversial belief these days, that patriotism is a virtue. And on the one hand, that seems kind of, well, there's two dangers there. One danger is that you start loving your country blindly. And, the other one is that you don't love the good things in the country at all. And if there's kind of a general way of things in public education today, my sense is that it's kind of a cynical attitude of graduates, that America is somehow a bad country, that its history is full of vice more than virtue, that its principles from the beginning were ill-conceived or full of hypocrites. Our position is that that's not true. We begin, America is good. And you're teaching civics to a 12th grader, and you're working on the Electoral College, you're working on the underpinnings of the Declaration of Independence. Well, that begins in kindergarten with the symbols of America, the bald eagle, different kinds of flags, George Washington, and a variety of stories around heroes that kind of shape the sense that America is a good place and a place that I'm interested in. If there's anything that really helps the younger students, K2, even K6, it's stories of virtue and vice and stories of heroes. I want to talk a little bit about that just to get a sense of what that might mean, because if you take George Washington, for instance, some of the great stories that you can tell about him as a commander in the American Revolution or as a president, those things can be a little bit daunting for a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year-old, and so they're not central to their image. Their image is a young boy who doesn't lie. And that is an important part, even if those stories are kind of apocryphal or not the full picture, that's an important element to say George Washington is the kind of person that I might be like one day. And that's an important place to begin. Ultimately, however, the goal of civics and history education from our perspective is not, it would be impossible just to come up with a bunch of George Washingtons or a bunch of Abraham Lincolns. It's students who can recognize that kind of greatness and be grateful for it. And the study of the American founding and the study of the Civil War in particular do that, principally for Washington and Lincoln and others. So stories of virtue and vice, beginning with some of the simple acts that great statesmen have done as children. And there's a variety of people one might pick. One of my it's a controversial person, but a really great hero that we teach at Golden View is Harriet Tubman. And we actually teach Harriet Tubman in the context of PE class, because the argument is not just that you can have morals and you can have a moral compass and then you can therefore act on it. She was able to move hundreds, thousands of miles, which is a physical feat. And so we ask students, okay, if you have a moral position that you want to be able to defend, can you do it? And that's an argument for why we have to run a quarter mile every day, which they're slowly getting used to. But it's true, that part's true. Civic education can wrap up in a lot of different things that happen at the school. The other thing I would say is the curriculum. And what I love about the 1776 curriculum is it doesn't shy away from controversy and doesn't mean to. If we're to pick two of the harder things to teach from a patriotic perspective, it's going to be the removal of the Indians and slavery. And there's no need to dance around those subjects. One can teach them directly when they arise in the curriculum. And honestly, one of the important parts there is in each of those circumstances, with each of those injustices, there's people on both sides arguing. So it's not just that there's slaveholders, there's lots of people arguing about the justice of this, and ultimately vindicated in the Civil War. But again, instead of taking that, something that was unjust, like if one wants to go there with the removal of Indians and ignoring it, or taking it as the defining feature, defining characteristic of America, one can simply teach it and say, these are the people who are arguing for it. These are the people who are arguing against it. This is what happened, and now let's talk about it. That is the spirit of the 1776 curriculum. What we really like about it is involving students in a deliberation about their past with the premise that America is good. So I think that's the overall kind of goal. ultimately, one of the aims is through history, through direct civics education, to have students appreciate, hopefully be grateful for structure. The structure of the Constitution, the structure of our government, and being explicit, direct, and obvious about all of these points. It becomes really hard in the later grades to really flesh this out, but that is the key part of our Constitution, what makes it lovable. It's not what makes it workable or useful for purposes, but admirable and worthy of our affection. And deliberating about that in class, reenacting some of the debates around the Constitution, that's a crucial part of civics education, to be involved in that kind of thinking. I think that's really, Jordan, all I had to present. And again, if there's questions about how we do it at Golden View or other approaches as the webinar goes on, I'm happy to address them.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate it. Do we have Dr. O'Toole back on, or? Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
All right. Hi, Dr. O'Toole. Yeah. So Dr. Garrow just kind of took us through, what civic education looks like at Golden View and through this curriculum. So I'd like to let you continue with
what I was saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. You guys who have been school principals know that it's nearly impossible to give a presentation without some technological problem happening, and it turns out this is no exception. So there we go. Thanks for rolling with it, guys. The last thing I wanted to say about the curriculum is that there are some principles that it is built around that I think will be helpful for those of you who are considering using it in your classroom or just thinking about the nature of history instruction in general. Some of the principles include, number one, students can be trusted with the whole story. In classical schools, we treat students with respect, and we do that by giving them a curriculum which is full of the very best that Western civilization, human achievement has to offer. We think that if you can read Moby Dick in its entirety, you should, and that you as a human being will respond to the challenge and the joy of doing that more than you would a summary or a Cliff's Notes version of Moby Dick. That's a literature example, but I think the teaching of history works a similar way. Students can tell when they are being talked down to, and they can tell when they're being given a partial or an edited version of the story. And there's really no reason to do that ever in instruction, even for very, very young students. So what the 1776 curriculum does is it gives you, the teacher or the homeschooling parent, tools so that you can give students the full story. This means primary source documents. This means asking questions to help students discover the theme or discover the importance of things, rather than giving them in advance an editorialized or carefully kind of engineered account of the story, because they will know if you're doing that. The second principle is that education should not be politicized. That is a hot topic today, and in the media and in the legislatures, state legislatures, and even at the federal level, we're having a discussion right now about what should students be learning and how should we be explaining history to them or science to them. And we think that a lot of that talk is misguided, because it turns out with history in particular, with American history in particular, we have the evidence already. Our country is an old country now, but compared to other countries, it's relatively young. And there is a mountain of evidence to be read for anyone who wishes to understand its history or the nature of its founding. And so we think give students that evidence, trust them with the whole story, and then let them form their political opinions as a result of their knowledge of what actually happened based on those primary sources. The third principle that I want to highlight is that no curriculum can be successful without a successful teacher. We all went to school. We all know that having the right books in front of us, Plato's Republic or Moby Dick or Shakespeare or the world's greatest, the world's greatest science experiment, none of these things can be successful without the mediator of the teacher between the student and the material. And so in classical education at Hillsdale College, we pay a lot of attention to the art of teaching. And we remind ourselves that the great books on their own cannot teach the average student. Instead, we have to bring those books to life, that history to life for the students. And so what you will see if you are a teacher using this curriculum is guidance rather than Hillsdale College dictating to you how it ought to be taught. You'll see ideas and suggestions and questions to ask rather than a script to read. You'll see things to focus on rather than, a concrete list of what must be taught. And that's because you, the teacher, if you are an excellent teacher of history, A, already know a lot about history, and B, already know a lot about teaching and how to be effective for these students in this setting. And it's not the job of this curriculum or any curriculum to try to do that essential work for you. We prize teachers, and we think that that profession is an honorable profession and a profession that the very best people need to be going into and staying in. And a big component of that, we think, is understanding the role of the teacher related to the role of curriculum. The final thing I will say, in case it's not clear already, is that despite what you read in the news about this curriculum, this is not Hillsdale College's counterweight to the 1619 project or the 1619 curriculum. That's a misunderstanding of what we're trying to do here. There are groups out there that are producing curriculum that are trying to achieve a certain end through students, trying to generate students who believe a particular thing, and who use what they have learned in school to then go and enact political and social change. This curriculum is not aiming to do that. Instead, we're aiming to give students the tools to read everything and understand everything on their own with the assistance of talented teachers. We want them to ask the big questions. We want them to have a rightfully proud or a rightful pride in their nation, because America is something to be truly proud of. But we don't want that pride to prevent them from asking and understanding the true nature of its history. So it's not an overly rosy view or a view that's seeking to offset a more critical account. That's not the right way to understand this. It's a different kind of thing entirely. And I think if you just look at the curriculum and the way that it works and the tools that it operates, you can see that. We truly hope it's helpful for teachers. We are encouraged by the amount of support that we've seen for it. And one of our goals in the Q&A is to help you know how to use it in your classroom. And so if you have questions about that, then I'd love to answer them. Thanks, Jordan. That's all I got.
Great. Thanks, Dr. O'Toole. Yes, please, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A box along with your first name and where you're joining us from. Lastly, on this webinar, for our part of it, I would like to take a look inside the curriculum, and in particular with an eye for what it is for teachers. It's mainly a resource for teachers rather than something that the students receive themselves or anybody else. And so we really want to kind of take a look at what are the features of it that may be of most greatest interest to teachers, and then how might a teacher employ that. So we're going to share parts of a preview of this if you haven't seen it already. And I'm just going to walk us through a few points to this. The first one is the matter of content. And there are a number of things in the introduction to the curriculum that are going to be of interest to teachers. There's a lot of advice in here that works with the rest of the curriculum. So if we start off here, I'd like to look at the content, and we put this in terms of engaging in inheritance. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, we think that one of the main controversies that emerges from around teaching American history and civics is that the way that you do it is involving what do you teach in the first place, right? It's a matter of what kind of things make the cut or don't. And the reason why we have to do this because we only have 13 years to teach students. And so there's no way to really, you can't do all of it, so you have to cut somewhere. And what's the principle that we use to make the decision? We take the approach that the things that students should study are the things that are going to, that have most significantly shaped their world that they're going to live in historically. There are lots of minutiae and great details and stories that we love to include, but we really ask ourselves, does it rise to the level of having an outsized impact compared to other things? And of course, this is an ongoing debate, but what we put forward in the curriculum is what we think is the main way that we go about this. And that's to ignore other ways to do this, including ones in which we're looking at historical figures based on the color of their skin, for instance. So that's where how we derive the content that's in the curriculum. The second thing, something that we're happy about this for teachers is a lot of the way that things are structured nowadays and teaching resources are not very clear. They are kind of convoluted. They use a lot of eduspeak, as it were. And from our own experience and the experience of our teachers, it's frustrating. And so we try to cut through that and streamline what this program entails. And so we hope that for teachers, it's a refreshing outline and it's very user-friendly. We wanted it to be that above all. So with that, I'd like to turn to the last thing that we really try to focus on, and that's the freedom to teach. We think that one of the things that students have, or that teachers have had deprived of them, is the freedom to teach, to not be weighed down by a lot of other tasks that they have to do, and instead to recover that love of learning that is usually the reason why teachers got into the profession in the first place. And so this has that in mind. It wants to restore the freedom of teachers to teach. And what that means is that, as Dr. O'Toole laid out, this doesn't provide dictates to teachers. It provides guidance, certain parameters, and some things that we think it'd be good for a teacher to think about in teaching about American history and civics. But by no means closes off other options or unnecessarily narrows or cramps the style of the teacher that the teacher wants to employ in their instruction. So with that, I'd like to walk us through how we might plan with the 1776 curriculum, looking at an example. And for that, I'd like to go to a middle school unit. And this has two of our initial lessons or units, and they're more forthcoming. Then eventually, in the early part of 2022, we'll have enough to canvas all of American history. So this is how we've laid it out. We've tried to simplify it, streamline it, make it easy to read in the first place. So in addition to a little overview at the beginning, outlining the lessons that are entailed and pacing guidance for how many classes a lesson might take, we provide some thoughts on why we're teaching this unit, some main enduring ideas that we might take away from it, and then some ideas about what the teacher should consider in the process. And this provides kind of a high level overview of, okay, get the lay of the land for the teacher before diving into the actual lesson planning. We also provide text for how teachers can use more or can learn more, and of course this will take time. But becoming a great teacher is a multi-year process, as the great teachers know. And also Hillsdale College online courses, free video courses that we think that are very helpful to teachers in wrapping their minds around some of these things and thinking about the best way to bring it to the students. So if we dive into one lesson, just to highlight a few things in it. First of all, we suggest that teachers start by creating a note outline. This goes for any grade level. This is K-12, but a general note outline based on any student text that we suggest, any primary sources, and then teacher text and the online courses. And that becomes kind of the backbone, the spine of our lesson. We offer some ideas on some preliminary assignments that might go along with it. And then we have the different content, geography and place. People. This is a person-driven curriculum. It's about real people with their biographies and their real thoughts and actions and how those interplay with each other and result in historical events. Right? It's not just one thing after another or just a name. These are real people that we want to bring alive for our students and think about why they're why they're thinking and acting the ways they are. Some terms and topics to help students navigate a lesson in a period of history. Primary sources for students. And some things to know by heart, some things that we think this would be good for an American student to learn, to memorize, to commit to their heart, and to carry with them for the rest of their lives. A brief timeline of major events that really show how things are related to each other, and then different images that we can pull. And the internet is a great resource here. We lay out, here's some images that will go with this lesson. A good, quick search engine search will bring these up quite readily. And we also have stories that we have for the American heart, little anecdotes and tropes that again, students can carry with them and they can punctuate the lesson. And then, if we enter into a class, we want to see a lot of questioning. A lot of not just those questions of students about the who, what, and when, and where, but also the why questions and the how questions. And how do you know that? What does that show us about this period of history or about human beings and human society? So, so these are all in there, and we think that you try to weave those all together. You don't have to use all of it. It has to be fine-tuned to your classroom. You want teachers to have the autonomy to do that. One of the areas that we try to provide a little bit more guidance on are some of those sticky points in history or civic instruction. Either some things that we oftentimes get wrong, or sometimes they can be a little thorny to deal with. And so we've offered some thoughts on how to navigate those, and we put them in the order in which we think that a lesson would naturally proceed. And these are called the keys to the lesson. And if we get these things right and carefully think about them, then you're going to end up with a pretty good lesson on the other end, and one that's accurate and true to history. So what does this look like in the classroom? We have this section on pedagogy, on taking a guest through the classroom and what it looks like. And what it means is that the teacher is leading, the teacher is bringing the students alongside her and telling a story. That's the main thing that we want to do with this curriculum, is tell a story from the true story of history, but not just reduce it to a lecture, but bring students into it by asking them great questions along the way so that they can help tell the story with their own answers. Right, these are dynamic, lively classes that have a momentum to them and a drama to them. And that should be the case for all of these. The study of primary sources, even, you're settling in to look at the real words, the real thoughts, unfiltered from the people who lived in a certain events and who many times acted in the historical period. So we want all these things to bring the history alive for students. The last thing that I'd like to preview here is that we've provided a number of sample resources along the way. So if I can quickly scroll through here, we can get to sample assignments, a reading quiz, a test that we have laid out, sample study guides for students, and the introduction holds a lot of information about how best we might employ this in our classrooms. And again, these are not things, teachers should adjust these. They should change them so that they fit what they've actually taught in the classroom and where their students are at. But we have study guides and we have tests, sample tests that go along with it. And then a writing assignment that sums up the entire unit at the end. If I can get to it here. Right here, so something that's grade level appropriate. And then we have for teachers, student-ready primary sources, ones that teachers can readily print off and, of course, adjust if need be, but also that are ready for students to pick up and to read. And we provide a little bit of background information, some guiding questions, and then we've laid it out so it's double spaced, plenty of room for students to annotate, and right-hand margin for notes and questions. So I think that what we get from this is a different way of approaching this, one that is a bit of a throwback to to what history used to be, but at the same time, I think some improvements that our schools have made in this instruction. So I just like to leave off with that, and that gives you a good sense, and a lot more information is in the introduction to the curriculum about how to best use this in your classrooms. So with that, I would like to reserve the remaining time here to address any questions we might have out there. So the first question, and I'll pose this to Dr. O'Toole, who has had her had her head concentrated on this over the last year or so. But as a first-time homeschool mom, this is from Susan. Can they do this? Can a homeschool mom do this? And then Dr. O'Toole, maybe I can answer one of her follow-up questions, which is how can I best prepare?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that question. We get that question all the time. And I think that's because parents, one of the good things about COVID, one of the few good things about COVID was parents got to see what was really happening in their children's classrooms because the work was coming home. Sometimes the Zoom meetings were happening in the dining room. And a lot of parents thought, wait a minute, this is not what I was expecting. I was expecting something a lot better than this. And so a lot of them took matters into their own hands, got used to doing that, and suddenly realized, wait a minute, I might be able to do this better at home than would be done if I was sending my children to school. Here at the college, we get questions almost weekly from parents who want to use Hillsdale College's K-12 curriculum at home. And we are working hard on providing a curriculum for homeschooling families. It's a big project and it'll be a while before it comes out. But in the meantime, I think the 1776 curriculum is a great place to start. What it will provide you is kind of an idea about how to teach students at different grade levels. So if you have a kindergartner, it will be refreshing to you to know what kindergartners in other Hillsdale schools, classical schools across the country are doing and what kind of things they're capable of. You as the parent know your child better than anyone. And so you will have an idea about how to go about it in your own home. But the curriculum can give you an idea about things to read, online courses. Hillsdale College offers a lot of online courses related to American history and civics and economics too, that will be helpful for deepening your own understanding. And I think this is a great way to go about it. If you are looking for more guidance about homeschooling, it's coming soon-ish. But in the meantime, we'd love to point you in the right direction for literacy and for mathematics and for some other things too. You can just email k12@hillsdale.edu.
Yeah, and Susan, I think that one thing to keep in mind, and this goes for all teachers and homeschooling parents, is it's just start somewhere. Something is better than nothing, and if the first way that we use this is to supplement things that we're already doing, that's great, right? That's a starting point, and teachers know that you can't go out there every single day and hit a grand slam in your first year of teaching something, or else you're going to be worn out very quickly and it's not going to be very good. And so, going out there and saying, okay, I'm going to just follow what I'm learning here and go with it and pull in the things that I can for as much time as I have for it. That's fine. And I think the main thing is for all teachers to discover that love of their content for themselves, and that will drive a lot of what you share with your students and what that content looks like. And I think that if we approach it in that way and just start pulling some of the things in, and as Dr. O'Toole mentioned, reading some of the teacher resources there, or watching or listening to the online courses that we've highlighted from Hillsdale College, then that's going to get you pretty far. And there's a lot there, but the idea is to let's put it all on the table for teachers to use. Great question. Another question from Dean is asking if this is a standalone curriculum, and I'm guessing that means, is this the only curriculum that Hillsdale offers? And I'll let Dr. O'Toole address that. I think she kind of addressed it in passing, but maybe she can speak to it a little bit more.
Probably as I was cutting out. Hi, Dean. Dean Bowen is from Waterbrook Christian Academy, and he sent us a very nice note the other day. We're fans, Dean. So the question is, what is the relationship of this to the rest of the curriculum? Is that correct?
Yeah. Is this a standalone thing, or are there other things here?
It stands alone, but it's created from the K-12 program guide, which is Hillsdale College's scope and sequence curriculum for its K-12 schools. The program guide is the product of many decades of work on the part of great teachers and professors here at the college. And we created the 1776 curriculum by taking the relevant portions of the program guide from K through 12 for American history, civics, in 8th grade and government in the high school. We took them out and we did the prep that a teacher would do if the teacher were teaching that curriculum. So it's the same scope and sequence, but with resources deepened. And this is the kind of project, gosh, if we go crazy, we could do this for every subject. I mean, we could do this for science, we could do this for literature. We've got talented teachers all over the country who are doing this kind of work. And by showing you the curriculum like this, you can see what's happening in Hillsdale schools and what's possible in schools all over the country. So very closely related. They match in scope and sequence. The 1776 curriculum is just deeper than the program guide. I should say, Jordan, the K-12 program guide is it's available to schools across the country via free license. We have schools all over the place apply to use this curriculum. And we try to make it available to as many people as we can. There's an application process involved just to ensure that the school is going to use it in accordance with the mission. But it's a valuable resource, I think, for schools that are looking to make sure that their teaching of an individual subject is excellent, and are also looking to make sure that their vertical alignment, if they're a K-12 school or a K-8 school, their vertical alignment is where it ought to be. So if you're interested in information about the whole curriculum, you can email k12@hillsdale.edu and we can talk to you about the free licensing program.
Great, thanks. And we have time for one last question. This is from Lou in Rhode Island, and I'll pose this one to Dr. Garrow. Just very quick response from Dr. Garrow. I've noticed some people thinking the founding is obsolete. Does the curriculum address the issue of how and why students take the past seriously?
Answer, huh? Okay. Yeah, great question. It is a hard question. I think the main kind of approach that a teacher takes to combat that is just simply take the founding seriously from the beginning. If you engage on the questions of, for instance, why does the Constitution allow for the slave trade to continue for a limited time? You have to engage the arguments, and you have to put yourself in the position of the people who had to make these decisions with real alternatives on the table. So just simply going forward and taking it seriously is the first kind of lesson on its own about the founding or about any kind in the past. It's also, I find that that's a fun question to just engage students with the question, at what point does the history become unimportant to you? And typically, they have kind of a general sense that the past is kind of obsolete, but they don't know when and they don't know how, and they can't say like, oh, it was in 1945 or it was in 2 generations ago. And pushing them on that question, I think, gets them to see that if the argument's good, the argument's good. It doesn't matter when it was made, and that in general that brings most students around in my experience.
Katie, did you have anything you'd like to address about that as well?
No, I think that's exactly right. And hi, Lou, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I think you're right. Like students kind of naturally feel like, oh, that was very old and that was a long time ago. And what does it have to say today? But if you have a fabulous storyteller who's bringing these things to life, that can kind of indirectly show students that we can learn from history. History matters. If you read, this is one of my favorite things about teaching and reading Aristotle. You think, Aristotle in ancient Greece with his toga, and it was so many thousands of years ago. But when you read what he's writing about and what he's concerned with, like I'm concerned with that stuff too, as is every student I've ever taught. Like, what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be good? How should I think about money? How should I think about pleasure? How should I think about honor? And so if you can just sort of show they're worried about the same stuff that we're worried about, and that's the stuff that really matters. And the fact that they were wearing a toga while they were worrying about it doesn't really make a difference. There's something more fundamental here. So we talk about that approach in the curriculum, and I think we see that approach in some of our best schools.
Great. Well, the curriculum is available for free at k12.hillsdale.edu. On behalf of Dr. O'Toole, Dr. Garrow at the Hillsdale K-12 Education Office, and the teachers in our 24 affiliate schools, I'd like to thank you for joining this conversation. We welcome any feedback you may have on the curriculum and hope that you'll find the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum helpful in teaching about America. Thank you for your